Hi there, my name is Mike Pishvaian. I'm an associate professor at Johns Hopkins University, and it's my pleasure today to talk about the relevant updates in GI cancer from ASCO 2023, incorporating some of the data that we've also seen throughout the year. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the targeted therapies and some of the more practical aspects of caring for patients with GI cancers that have come up in the last roughly 12 months. So we actually have a new targeted therapy for gastrointestinal cancers, and that's Claudin 18.2 targeted antibodies. This was highlighted in two practice-changing studies that we expect will lead to FDA approval of a novel therapy, zolbetuximab. So let me start with a little bit of background. Claudin 18.2 is a tight junction protein that we all learned about during medical school, and it's a protein that's normally expressed in the gastric mucosal as well as actually in pancreatic mucosal cells as well. Interestingly, the expression of Claudin 18.2 is maintained even as a typical epithelial cell degenerates into a gastric cancer cell. And so as you can see here on the cartoon on the right, those cells, as they get disordered from their typical columnar cellular pattern into a more dispersed cancerous pattern, the tight junction protein, which is usually trapped and unavailable to antibodies, all of a sudden becomes visible to antibody-based targeting as well as therapies. And so that's where targeting Claudin 18.2 with antibody-based therapy becomes really appealing. Zolbetuximab is a Claudin 18.2 monoclonal antibody that's been developed, has gone through phase 1 testing, and because of the promising early results in phase 2, there were two GI or upper GI cancer studies that were developed. The first was presented at ASCO GI in 2023 and was called the Spotlight study. It was a global randomized double-blind placebo-controlled phase 3 trial. Patients were screened for the expression of Claudin 18.2, and as you can see here in the bottom, there were more than 2,000 patients that were screened for eligibility for the study. 38.5% of them were Claudin 18.2 positive, and their threshold for positive was a high level of expression, which included Claudin 18.2 at moderate to strong staining in greater than 75% of tumor cells. I will digress to mention that there are other Claudin 18.2 targeted therapies, including antibody-drug conjugates and CAR T cells, that might not need that higher level of expression. And so just any expression levels seems to be present in as many as 75% of gastric cancers. In any case, in this study, they were able to screen over 2,000 patients. 38.5% were Claudin 18.2 high expressing, and thus were eligible for the study. And they ultimately enrolled about 500 patients. And the randomization was to FOLFOX, standard of care FOLFOX, which would be appropriate for any upper GI metastatic cancer, with or without zolbetuximab, which is an IV antibody given once every 3 weeks. Patients were able to go on to maintenance therapy after disease of stability, where they basically dropped the oxaliplatin and were only on 5-FU and the zolbetuximab alone or placebo in the control arm. And interestingly, what they found in this study was that the addition of zolbetuximab in Claudin 18.2 positive gastric cancers led to an improvement in both progression-free and overall survival. The overall survival benefit was nearly 3 months, and even the progression-free survival benefit was about 2 months. The response rate was also very high in both arms. Interestingly, the zolbetuximab did not actually seem to improve the response rate despite the extension in progression-free and overall survival. This was a drug that caused some side effects. These should be considered on-target adverse events because essentially you're blocking one of the key tight junction antibodies. And so there was 10% more grade 3 or 4 nausea and vomiting in the zolbetuximab arm of study. Interestingly, that seemed to occur only in the first couple of cycles and then died down. Following on the heels of the Spotlight study presented at ASCO was the GLOW trial, which was a very similar study, but in this case using a backbone of Capox instead of FOLFOX. So GLOW was a phase 3 trial of Capox with or without zolbetuximab, very similar design, with more than 2,000 patients screened, and again, 38.4% Claudin 18.2 positive, and over about 500 patients were enrolled. They also followed a similar pattern of allowing the patients to drop the oxaliplatin to continue on to maintenance capecitabine with or without zolbetuximab. And the primary endpoint in this study was actually progression-free survival, but overall survival was a key secondary endpoint. This study was also positive in that the progression-free survival was improved compared to placebo with the addition of zolbetuximab, 8.2 versus 6.8 months. And the median overall survival was also improved from 12.1 months to about 14.4 months with the addition of zolbetuximab. So these are two large randomized phase 3 studies that we all anticipate will lead to FDA approval of zolbetuximab for Claudin 18.2 high expressing upper GI cancers, probably in the United States, presumably worldwide, but I can never really predict the FDA. As I mentioned earlier, there are also many other Claudin 18.2 targeted therapies in development, including antibody drug conjugates, dual immune checkpoint agents, as well as CAR T-cell therapies. So I think this is going to be an area of significant growth in the coming years.